I want to thank Deb Klein and Julie and the rest of the Constitution Day Committee for having me here today. And thank you for not putting, usually I get this really high podium. I gave a talk in California last week, and the podium was literally up to here. And I look like a little head, like looking around like that. So I got these little short podiums, which is nice. And after I got that call, before the Gacy case, and I think Mike, I ran into a friend of mine, a public defender over there and his family. He knows, because I was a PD at one time, and I was 6'4" before the Gacy case, and this is all that's left of me now. Anyway, it's a real honor and privilege, and I'm very humbly stand before you doing this. It's tough. I was born in the old Italian neighborhood in Chicago. Nobody in my family went to college. I was the first person to ever go to college. Then to law school. My dad wanted me to be a doctor, and because he didn't like lawyers. My dad was a newspaper truck driver, a little stocky, short Italian guy, and I went to college. He was proud of that, and then he wanted me to go to medical school. I didn't get into medical school. I got the worst grade in the entire country on the medical college admissions test, so I decided to go in the Marine Corps. After the Marine Corps, I decided I was going to try what I always liked, what my passion always was, and that was to be a lawyer and hopefully a politician. But after the Gacy case, forget about being a politician. That didn't work out. And my dad wasn't real happy about me being a lawyer. And I'll tell you a quick story about him, how it relates to the Gacy case, then we'll go into the Constitution. It's my favorite Gacy story, and some of you may have heard this before, but to show you his personality, Gacy's personality. When I was representing him, he was, all these bodies were coming out of his house. I understand there's maybe a couple of police officers in here who worked on the case back then, but the bodies were coming out of his house. It was in the paper every day. He was arrested. He confessed, and he's in Cermak Hospital, the county jail. He's in the jail hospital. While he's there, my dad's car gets vandalized. My dad had this big powder blue Lincoln Continental, and he saved his whole life for that. That was his pride and joy, and people hated me. I got hate mail. I still get hate mail sometimes, but people hated me from all over the country, all over the world. I was getting hate mail and all kind of threats. My dad goes out to his car, and on his car, it was either etched or written in Elmer's glue, your son's a fag, because only a fag would represent John Gacy, and he was furious. Now picture this little short Italian truck driver from Chicago. You look at me, you see him anyway. And he was really upset. Grabs his gun, he goes outside, he's going to shoot somebody, he's running all over. We calm him down, we say, Dad, come on, relax, take it easy. My mom calms him down, my wife, calm him down. He says, take it easy, you got insurance, make a police report, it'll be okay. So he calms down. Now it's Christmas Eve, 1978. Now picture this, I'm in my living room, my kids, my dad's sitting there. We're talking about Christmas, and the phone rings. It's John Gacy. And Gacy says, hey, Sam, I read about what happened to your dad's car in the newspaper. Apologize to him. I'm really, sorry about what happened. I said, John, you could tell my dad yourself. You apologize to him. He goes, okay. So I hand the phone over to my dad. I go, Dad, it's John Gacy. He wants to talk to you. He goes, I don't want to talk to him. I said, take the phone. He wants to talk to you. He goes, I want to talk to him. And we're going back and forth with his phone, and he finally takes it, and he's like this, and he starts sweating like I'm sweating now. He starts sweating. He goes, all right, yeah, thanks. He gives me the phone. He goes, here, you know what this goof said to me? I said, no, what, Dad? He goes, Mr. Amirante, I'm really sorry about what happened to your car just because Sam's my lawyer, but there's a lot of nuts running around out there. It's a true Gacy story. He had no clue. He was like the biggest nut in the world, probably the world's greatest con man and manipulator. And I had the, either misfortune, or nowadays I guess good fortune of representing him. The case sort of fell right in my lap when I left the public defender's office. It was my first case in private practice. But as I told you, I always had this burning passion for our country. I wore my Marine Corps, thank you, Deborah. I wear my Marine Corps emblem on my collar all the time. And, or my lapel, it's a lapel, right? Anyway, I've had this burning passion. My dad used to talk about Abraham Lincoln and George Washington, and I used to read about Clarence Darrow when I was a kid, and I love this stuff. I loved it, and it was just sort of a passion. And to this day, at my old age, that passion continues. And today is such a wonderful, wonderful day because today is a day we get to celebrate that passion that I have and so many of us have here. We're so lucky, we are so lucky to live in this country where we have so many wonderful rights, inalienable rights they're called, rights that are God-given rights that nobody could take away. They could be taken away, but pursuant to our Constitution, they can only be taken away if we are guaranteed due process of law, if we are guaranteed fairness, if we are guaranteed to be heard. We have a right to peaceably assemble. I have a right today to wear this White Sox tie, in spite of probably the number of Cub fans in here today. And the Sox hopefully will beat Detroit later on today and be 3 games in first place. But that's my right. That is my right as an American citizen, to express myself, to say what I want to say, and to do what I want, as long as my right to do that does not interfere with somebody else's rights. And that's where the law comes in. Our Constitution, the first articles, created the government that we have. And it says we the people, we are the government. Okay, we make the rules, but we do it through our representatives, through our senators and our representatives. It's the first article of the Constitution. That's our representative branch of government, okay, the lawmaking branch of government. Then it created an executive branch, the branch that enforces the Constitution, the president, the governors, state's attorneys, police officers, all part of the executive branch of government. And then we have the judicial branch, which I have had the honor of serving in. I had the honor of serving, and I retired 7.5 years ago. And that branch is the conscience of the government. Those 3 branches balance each other out. And that was given to us by our forefathers in our Constitution. And 225 years ago today, the birthday of that Constitution, it still exists, and it's still strong, and it still protects each and every one of us. And again, I wear this Marine emblem because what protects that Constitution are those young men and women who are dying right now over in a faraway land to help those people in those lands have and enjoy the human rights that we enjoy in this country. So let's never forget them. That Constitution protects us, and our military protects that Constitution. Our judges protect that Constitution. Our lawyers, such as Mike I talked about, who goes into court every single day. And I still, to this day, when I walk past an American flag, when I see that flag, when I used to walk past that flag in my courtroom every single morning, I'd get a chill. When I stand up at the ball game and sing the national anthem, a little chill runs down me. And I don't know why. I don't know how it happens, why it happens, but I know I love it and I believe in it. And this all started, and it's in my book if you want to buy my book. It's in a book. This started with a guy named John Adams. John Adams was the first lawyer to become president of the United States. John Adams was the first vice president of the United States. John Adams was a patriot. He was a believer in human rights. And he was the man who defended the British soldiers who were basically terrorists at the time, the soldiers who shot upon an angry mob in Boston, which became the Boston Massacre. Nobody wanted to represent these people. Nobody wanted to represent these soldiers. These are members of the British Army, Navy, that were going to be our enemies very shortly thereafter. And John Adams stepped forward, and he agreed voluntarily to represent these soldiers. And that was against everybody. His cousin Sam Adams, who also was a patriot, didn't want him to do it. He took a risk that was just unbelievable. But because he took that risk, one of the amendments to the Constitution came about, and it's the 6th Amendment, the right to counsel. And as recently seen, and I'm sure we have opinions all over the board on this, and I heard I was a commentator in Drew Peterson case, the right to confrontation, the right to counsel, the right to confront your accusers. These are very important rights. It came about from John Adams' representation originally of the soldier in the Boston Massacre. Of course, we also have, if you're charged with a crime, the right to be presumed innocent until you're proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. The right to remain silent. Nobody could ever force anybody to become a witness against themselves in this country. The right to have a jury trial, a public jury trial. The right to bring witnesses in. The right, of course, to confront or cross-examine witnesses. These are all very important rights that are protected by our Constitution, by our Bill of Rights to this day. And if you ever want to feel that passion, and if you ever want to see that Constitution, go to Washington, D.C. I urge every one of you, if you're ever in Washington, D.C., go to the archives. Go to the National Archives. Have any of you ever been there? Show of hands. That's good, because you've seen that. The documents themselves are right there. Talk about chilling and excitement all at the same time. You go into that place in these hallowed halls, and you see our original Constitution. It was ratified 225 years today. And you see the original Bill of Rights in there. And it's amazing the feeling that comes over you. You talk about it, you think about it, you hear about it, but then when you really see it, it creates something in you. What I like to do at this time, talking about John Adams, I don't usually like to read when I'm giving a talk, but I just want to read you the first couple of pages of my book. I guess I'll stand here and do it. And it talks about John Adams. And it's very, very important because this book is about representing a serial killer. And Dorothy, on the way in, the first question she asked me, she asked me, "You're the lawyer?" She goes, "You're the lawyer?" I said, "Yeah." She goes, "How do you defend that guy?" Like that. So this is like a 400-page answer to that question, because people always ask you that. Well, how do you do that? Why do you do it? And you know, the shortest example I could give, if any of you know what a doctor does, you've ever heard of the Hippocratic Oath, the oath to save life, to preserve life. If John Gacy were a patient of that doctor, there's not one of you in this room who would question that doctor's duty to help John Gacy. Not question his duty to save John Gacy's life, because that doctor takes an oath to do that very thing. Well, we lawyers and other people, lawyers, statesmen, politicians, people holding office, people, and the Constitution Committee might take the oath. We take an oath to defend and protect the Constitution of the United States of America. So when a serial killer comes to you, and believe me, I didn't know Gacy was a serial killer. When he came to me, he said, "Can you do me a favor?" I thought he was a nice guy in the community. And the scariest thing about this guy is he wasn't scary at all. But when somebody comes to you, you don't think about those things. You don't think about what that person's charged. You're not judging that person. You are protecting that person's constitutional rights. You protect it with all your power, all your willpower, all your energy, because that's your duty as a lawyer. And if it's your duty protecting an individual's rights, one thing. You could be a prosecutor and be protecting the rights of the people of the state of Illinois, or the people of the government, the federal government. That's your duty, and it's your job, and you have to do it zealously and honestly and within the bounds of the law. But that is your duty. But people question all the time, how do you do that? Well, everybody hates a lawyer who does that. And like I said, people, when you hate John Gacy, you hate the lawyer too. But it's our duty. You never even think about it. It's that process of education that you're getting, and some of you are getting here now at the College of DuPage and elsewhere. You just never question that duty. If you question it, then you shouldn't be doing what you're doing as a lawyer. So anyway, I start off this book, I'm talking about that duty, about John Adams. I really obviously respect and admire. In 1770, when this country was in its birth throes, the most hated man in America was a man named Captain Thomas Preston. He was the commander of a small cadre of British soldiers who fired upon a gathering of disgruntled colonists, killing 5. This event came to be known as the Boston Massacre. The 5 men who died as a result of this event are considered by most historians to be the first casualties of the Revolutionary War. As is always the case, there are 2 sides to the story as to why this tragedy occurred. The colonists, led primarily by Sam Adams, one of the most outspoken writers and revolutionaries of the day, claimed that the British fired upon a peaceful crowd and killed 5 patriots without just cause. The British soldiers claimed that they had fired upon an angry mob in self-defense. There are 2 reasons that will cause good men to abandon their long-standing, dearly held morals, values, and principles and revert to more primitive, barbaric practices to resolve conflict. That is when their hearts are filled with anger or when their hearts are filled with fear. Because the colonists were angry over taxes imposed by the British without representation, along with other perceived injustices, and because they were fearful of the sheer might of the British crown in general, and of the soldiers that were now being billeted in their town to quell potential uprisings, in particular, their hearts were filled with both fear and anger. They wanted revenge against the British captain and the British soldiers under his command. Evidence be damned, facts be damned. They wanted revenge, and revenge that was swift and sure. They wanted the heads of the captain and his men on a spit. One man came forth and said in a loud, clear voice, "I stand for the law." The man that took the soldiers' case when no other man would stand in their defense was John Adams. John Adams, one of our nation's true founding fathers, a signer of the Declaration of Independence, our first vice president, our second president of the United States, and a man of principle. His response was said to be this: counsel is the last thing an accused person should lack in a free country. He agreed to defend these men in spite of what it might do to his reputation, to his law practice, or to his future plans. He took the case because he believed that free men had certain rights. These were among the heartfelt principles on which he built his own life. Those principles are woven into the fabric of our Constitution. Those principles represent our principles as Americans. Every person accused of a crime shall have the right to a speedy and public trial by an impartial jury of his peers. Every person so accused shall have the right to face his accuser. And think about the Peterson case, which says, face his accuser in a court of law. Every person so accused shall have the right to counsel. Many men and women have fought and died to preserve those principles, those rights. So keep that in mind when you hear someone say that this crime is too gruesome, or this person is too dangerous, or this issue is too complicated to allow those principles to stand. And this includes the frightened flock that today seeks to exclude terrorists from those principles. Keep in mind that the very men that John Adams defended were uniformed members of an army of a foreign power, as I told you, that would soon become an enemy. Still, they had their day in court. There's no just cause or justification to usurp our Constitution. I want you to remember the words of Judge Louis Garippo when he said, through tears of pride, what we do for the John Gacys of the world, we will do for everyone. I will serve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. Again, that is the oath that we ask our president to take, together with every other person in public service. Every member of our military takes that oath. Every lawyer takes that oath. Every American lives by that oath. It does not say, I will serve, protect, and defend the popularity polls, or the will of the people, or the frightened masses. It does not say, I will serve, protect, and defend the Constitution unless there are no conditions, there are no qualifications. When harried and nervous people jump in front of microphones, sorry, on your radio station, microphones, and scream and rail that we would suddenly do something in direct contravention to that upon which we have based our very system of justice, when they tell you that we should abandon that which men and women have fought and died for, and which has worked so well since the beginning of this beautiful experiment that we call America, in favor of that which we have always criticized about lesser countries, kindly tell them to pound sand. And that's what the Constitution's about, and that's how I feel. You know, I'm sweating, with all this passion. And actually, when we wrote the book originally, we didn't have pound sand. We said, tell them to piss up a rope. And the publisher, the editor, didn't want that in there, so we had to take it out, so we said pound sand. But anyway, and I'm sure each one of you, and we express in this book, but I'm sure each one of you feels that way, especially if you know somebody who ever was accused of committing a crime, or especially if you have something to say You want to peaceably assemble. Look at the teachers. We might not like what's going on in Chicago and Lake Forest right now with teachers striking. And we might think the kids belong in school. And we do, and I think so. Personally, I think so. But you know what? Those teachers have a right to assemble. 1 year ago today, coincidentally enough, or ironically enough, or maybe on purpose, the Occupy Wall Street thing came about. It's a 1 year anniversary today. No matter if you agree or disagree with them, in this country, those folks had a right to do that. Tea Partiers have a right to do what they're doing, whether you agree with them or disagree with them, because that is their right to assemble, and they have a right to speak their mind. Again, as long as they don't trample on the rights of other people. And that is why the laws we have are in existence. Because those laws hopefully prevent some people who go too far in expressing themselves, or too far almost in an anarchy way of doing things. Then we have laws that are developed based upon constitutional principles that shouldn't be violated, and if they're violated, a punishment is imposed. The punishment can't be cruel and unusual. We've done away now with most death penalties, again, whether you agree or disagree. These are the things that happen because this Constitution that we have, that we are celebrating today, is a basis for all of that. And it's a living, amorphous, growing document that is there all the time for us. And if something is wrong, if a law is created where it's not a good law, or it violates this Constitution, then the lawyers go into court and argue that, and the judges decide. Or if it's a trial and somebody's accused of something, a jury might decide. But these are the things we have, and these are what we're celebrating. That's why we are all here today. And I urge each one of you, it's funny, there's Bibles out there, and some people read the Bible, and they read every verse in the Bible. And some people, I imagine, read the Constitution. But I bet there are a lot of lawyers who have never even read the Constitution. I bet there are a lot of people here who've never read the Bill of Rights. I urge you today, take a moment out of your schedule. Take time. It doesn't take long. The Constitution is not a very long document, and it's pretty easily read. Take time today on Constitution Day to read that document. Take time to read that Bill of Rights. Take time to read all those amendments. They gave women, think about it. Into this century, women couldn't vote. That Constitution is there, and it's there to be supported by the people, we the people. And here's another thing I want you to keep in mind. We always have a problem, we have a problem now with illegal aliens and what we do with them. I imagine originally we came to this country, I say we, but people came here back with Columbus, and so came here illegally too. But now we have to have rules because so many people want to come to America. As much as it's criticized, as much as we are criticized all over the world, people want to flock in here. So we have to be careful that too many people don't come in. So there has to be certain rules. But those people come in, just like terrorists, just like criminals. They must be protected under the Constitution. You just can't say, here, get out of here, because you know what our Constitution says? These brilliant men who signed the Declaration of Independence, the brilliant men who signed and ratified the Constitution, they had this vision of the future. And they defined what a citizen was. A citizen who's born in this country, or they said naturalized and so forth. They said all citizens have a right to these protections. But then they went on to say, and if you read it carefully, they don't say all citizens have the right. Our Bill of Rights says all persons. It doesn't matter what the person is, what their sex is, what their religion is, what their race is, what their geographical location is, what their economic background is. It doesn't matter. What matters is that they are a person. And that's what counts. And I keep pointing at a book. This is not the Constitution. It's about Gacy. But it's a book in my hand, so I like to wave it. It's Italian, But persons are protected. All persons. No person, it says, shall be deprived of life, liberty, or the pursuit of happiness without due process of law. So keep that in mind too. When you hear situations where you get aggravated, somebody's here and there's illegals and they're doing this and doing that, keep that in mind. They are people. And we in America protect the inalienable rights of all people. And we protect those inalienable rights through our Constitution. I don't have much more to say than that. I wanted to really put that in your hearts, your mind, which I'm sure most of you wouldn't be here today, feel that way anyway. I'd like to ask if any of you have questions. We could talk about the Gacy case. I could tell you more stories. There's funny stories about Gacy. I'll give you one more about Gacy. He, when he was getting ready to get the death penalty, and he died, I think it was May 12th, 1994, some woman befriended him. She was you don't have pen pals nowadays. Everything's email and electronic, but she was his pen pal, I guess. And then she used to go down and see him all the time because she had 2 sons in the penitentiary where he was. And so he either called me or he wrote to me or we had a conversation about it. And he says, Sam, or I said, John, I heard on the news that some woman wants to marry you. And he goes, yeah, you believe that? Excuse me, ladies, the broad, he called her broad. You believe that, broad? I said, what? Why do you marry? Somebody in the world likes you, John, maybe. And he said, I believe this fat, ugly broad. He goes, she wants to marry me. Why would I marry this chick? She's got 2 sons in a joint down here with me. I don't want to marry her and ruin my reputation. Again, this is a guy, he had no clue of what was going on. He was probably one of the most complex human beings you could ever imagine happening. Anyway, I have a question.
What did he do?
What's your name?
Kristen.
Kristen?
Yes. What was he tried for?
Gacy was a serial killer who was tried and convicted of killing 33 young boys and burying them mostly in his crawl space, one underneath the dining room or family room floorboards, one underneath a barbecue grill in the back, one in his garage, and then 4 in the Des Plaines River, where it goes over Joliet, where I-55 goes over Des Plaines River there. He used to actually go out after he would kill them. The last 5 victims, they only found 4 bodies. There were 34 victims. And all this stuff you read about, now you hear about that they're looking for their bodies. There's no other bodies. I can tell you, I'm 99, I can never absolutely guarantee, but I'm 99.99999% sure there's no other bodies, because he told me about everything. It's one of the reasons I wrote the book. But he was from 1972 to 1978, he went on a killing spree that became more and more frequent. He used to use a thing called the rope trick, where he would show these handcuffs to these young boys, and he'd get them high or stoned, or he would just talk to them, con him. He was a brilliant con man, make him think he was a policeman, just different things he would do. And he'd put the handcuffs on himself, and he'd have him laughing and everything, put the handcuffs, and he'd go around, voila, and he'd be out of the handcuffs. And they go, that's cool, John, can I try that? And he would give them the cuffs, and they'd put them on themselves, and he'd start laughing, and they're trying to get, okay, now what's the trick, John, what's the trick? And he'd be holding a key. He goes, the trick is I have the key, you don't, you're dumb and stupid. And then he'd start changing, you're dumb and stupid. And he go, come on, John, what, you're kidding here? And then he'd start getting goofy and start attacking the boys. And he'd say, here, I got another trick for you, it's called the rope trick. And he'd put a rope around their neck and turn it like a tourniquet. While they're trying to get out of the cuffs, he would turn this thing just tight enough where it would get tighter and tighter as they struggled, and he would say that they're killing themselves because they were dumb and stupid. They didn't deserve to live. He was a perfect storm, a very complex individual who did not fit the stereotype of a person like that at all. He was like you would think a mean kid, hurts little kittens and puppies and just does weird stuff. He never did anything like that. He was a very timid little boy. His dad used to call him a fruit picker and all these horrible names and everything. And he was just, everything sort of happened. Again, it's 400 pages of it in there. So it's, I can't tell you, but it was a perfect storm created John Gacy. And at that time, there was a different attitude among police departments too. Deb mentioned that I wrote the Dave mentioned that I wrote the I-Search law. There was the Missing Child Act of 1984. Because when I argued to the jury, I used to do something about this guy. Find out what makes him tick. Find out what caused him to do this so we could prevent something like this from happening in the future. Well, nobody did anything about it. I didn't do anything. So in 1984, I was sitting in court and listening to the case. And the night before I saw the movie Adam about the missing boy in Florida, I looked at my own 2 sons who were sleeping, and I thought, what would I do if my sons were missing like that? Where would I go? Besides being the volatile Italian father that I am, I'd try to make sure this guy never got to trial. And we don't want our government acting like that, but that's how I would be. I thought, what would I do? And I just started penning this law. And it became the Missing Child Act of 1984, called I-Search, the Illinois Enforcement Agency to Recover Children. And now it's the Amber Alert. The thing is the Amber Alert. So that's kind of the silver lining that came out of the Gacy case. But at that time, police would wait. If one of you, say you're under 21 here, you were missing, the police would not investigate you. For 72 hours, they'd let it go. There was no follow-up at all because they figured you got to fight with your parents, your boyfriend, your girlfriend, you're upset about something, and nobody cared. And so the kids who were missing just slipped through the cracks. And that's why it was able to happen and happen so often. Plus, a lot of his victims are homosexual. And the police had a whole different attitude. Society had a whole different attitude on homosexuals at the time. And if a homosexual went in and complained about Gacy, what he did, they would just throw him out of the police station and not listen to him. So, just different things like that. I don't think John Gacy could happen today based on the changes in society and attitudes and in police law enforcement. Hopefully the I-search law, because it created the computer system and statewide little units that specialize in finding lost, missing, runaway children. But none of those things existed before 1984. And his murder spree went from 72 to 78. Okay? He was a serial killer. Yes, sir.
I got a question. Did he also try to do everything he can? Did he dress up like a clown to lure other boys, or he try to make some type of...
What's your name?
Fred.
Fred, that's a good question because, and that's one of the common misconceptions. I wanted to set the record straight for history with my book, which is called Defending a Monster. I keep putting plugs in for that, you notice. But one of the misconceptions is he used his clown outfit to lure kids and do that. John Gacy was a total dichotomy. When he was a clown, he was a good clown. He was a happy clown. He wasn't this evil clown. He always had the pointed things. It's all BS. It wasn't like it was. John Gacy used to go to Children's Hospital, and he wanted to make kids laugh. I sat down and talked to him one time about a little boy whose parents had to take him to Mexico. He was suffering from cancer, terminal cancer. Couldn't find any cures here, so they were taking him to Mexico or South America or somewhere. And Gacy and I were talking about this while he was sitting in the jail in the Cermak Hospital. And he was crying like a baby. I mean, not crocodile tears, not something to make me feel sorry for him. He was crying like a little baby. He was so upset about that this little boy couldn't get the help he needed and this little boy was going to die. And he cared about it. So he used to go to Children's Hospital with his clown suit to make kids laugh. Then he would switch in turn and talk to me about his victims, who he killed. Nothing. No affect at all. No emotion. No conscience. No guilt feelings. No awareness of how he should feel about that. He was a split. He was like the book Jekyll and Hyde. When he was good, when he was a clown, he was good. He was the best of good. When he was a precinct captain, he was good. He was the best of good. When he was a neighbor, he was good. He was the best of good. When he was Johnny the son, he was good. Very, very good. When he was Johnny the brother, he was very, very good. He was never mean to his sisters. He was never mean to anybody in his family. He was never mean to anybody, any of his friends. He was never mean when he was a clown. But when he was bad, there was nobody more evil. Nobody more evil. He was that perfect split. I always thought when he got arrested that he really, truly wanted to get caught. He was saying, stop me before I kill again. He changed things right at the end. He really seemed like he wanted to stop. And if John Gacy lived in a structured environment forever in the jail, he wouldn't have hurt anybody. He wouldn't have killed anybody. He would have been Mr. Politician, as he was in the jail. If he was ever released from jail or from a structured environment, he would have killed again. He was planning to put a second story on his house because he ran out of room in the crawl space. And if there was another body, he was going to start putting bodies between the floors of the house. That's how sick this human being was, how broken his brain was. But, very, very odd and weird.
Did they do any psychiatric tests on him?
Oh, God. Your name? Nikki. Nikki wants to know if we did any psychiatric tests. John Gacy was probably the most studied guy before trial. We had like 14 psychiatrists, psychologists from all over the country, from the Menninger Institute, from University of Chicago. Yeah. All the witnesses testified at trial, and the state's witnesses testified that they thought he was sane. Our witnesses testified that, they wouldn't give us the insanity thing. They would all testify he was mentally ill, and that he could not conform his conduct to the requirements of law, and that he could not appreciate the criminality of his act, which is the standard. But Nikki, obviously the jury didn't believe that. They came back in 2 hours with a guilty. But they testified. We gave him sodium amytal tests, drug-induced EEGs, alcohol-induced EEGs. He was subject to every test known at the time. Of course, we didn't have the DNA stuff like there is today. After he died, Dr. Helen Morrison was one of the doctors, took his brain. He willed his brain to Helen Morrison. She took his brain and she cut it all up and she examined it and went under a microscope and did DNA testing, everything else on the brain. It was perfectly normal. His physiological brain was perfectly normal. There was nothing wrong with it. But we did every kind of study. I was hoping those studies could go on so we could look for little clues. And I told the jury it'll happen again, and it's happened. I mean, he's right. There are a lot of nuts out there, and it's happened again. And if we could find something to prevent that from happening, I mean, it would be a wonderful thing. So, but yes, he was examined quite a bit. Yes, sir, Mr.
My name is Cody.
Hi, Cody.
Did he ever justify to you like the reason why he did it? All the time?
Frankly, by the time he died in 1994, he was denying they ever did anything at all. I mean, as I said, he was such a manipulative guy, and he's still manipulating people from the grave now. He's manipulating my good friend, Sheriff Tom Dart of Cook County, who's a lawyer, who's a wonderful sheriff, and Bob Egan works for him, who was one of the prosecutors in the Gacy case, so he keeps looking for more bodies. But he's manipulating from the grave, Gacy, because he still has people looking for bodies. He's laughing wherever he might be, but he's he's laughing about it. When he talked to me, and it's not attorney-client privilege because he talked to a lot of people about this, but he did it because he said these people were dumb and stupid. This was his justification, because they were homosexual, they were dumb and stupid, and they were greedy. Those are the three reasons he gave for killing all the kids he killed. Bob Mata, who defended him with me, and I used to talk to him and say, John, you sure you did this? Because we did this Amatel test and we did this test. Maybe somebody else did it. Maybe Rossi or Cram did it, and they got you stoned or drunk, and you were knocked out. You woke up and there was a body next to you with the rope around its neck, and you just assumed you did it because you didn't know what you were doing it for. He would go, yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe that's what happened. And it didn't. I mean, I knew what happened because he looked at me eyeball to eyeball, as close as we are right here, and he told me in detail about every single murder. But he had convinced himself, so he's not only a con of other people, he conned himself into believing by the time he was executed that he didn't commit the crimes. And I was hoping his last lawyers, who I know who were friends of mine, would have convinced him to apologize, would have convinced him to say, I'm sorry, to show some remorse. Instead, you know what his last words reputedly were? Kiss my ass. That was John Gacy. And I truly believe he had no clue he was a nut. He had no clue that he was going to die on the gurney. Even while being on the gurney, for some reason he thought he was going to live. He used to put himself in sort of a fugue state, a trance, and his eyes would flutter, and his eyelids would flutter up and down, his eyes would go back, and his body would tremble. And I think he put himself in that sort of trance, and he really didn't believe he was going to die. Yes, sir, he was first.
I just wondered, did you have
You didn't tell me your name.
Oh, I'm Lance. Did you have any
Les?
final words
I'm sorry.
like right before the execution?
I what?
Did you have any final conversation with him right before the execution?
No, I didn't. Greg Adamski and Karen Conti were his last lawyers, and Greg passed away a couple of years ago, but Karen's still around. They talked to him a lot, but he actually convinced them. She would tell me, Sam, he didn't do this. He was out of town. He was in Indiana. He was in Wisconsin. Gacy was a BSer, man. Airplanes weren't like they are today. Where you need all the IDs and everything. Back in 1972, anybody could fly a plane. You give anybody a ticket, you could buy a ticket, create alibis all over the place. But I wish I was able to talk to him. Like I say, to convince him that, come forth and show remorse, to show a little humanness in him. It was a few years before he died that I talked to him. Right before he died. Yes, ma'am.
My name is Sharon.
Hi, Sharon.
What kind of defense then do you put together when somebody has admitted that they did these crimes?
Well, for that, I'll bring the public defender. Where's Mike? Did he leave? He left. There he is. What kind of defense do we put together when somebody admits to you they commit these crimes? Well, it was very easy in Gacy because he admitted to the police. He told them about the crawl space. He showed them where the bodies were. I mean, I only had one defense, and that was insanity, and that's because he was insane. He was crazy. And, if somebody cannot appreciate the criminality of their act or conform their conduct to the requirements of the law, under the law, they're mentally ill and not culpable, not responsible for their crimes. So that case, actually was kind of easy to put that defense on. Had he not confessed to the police, and he still told me, my duty as a lawyer is still to represent him zealously and vigorously. And we just had it in the, in this Peterson case. You put on your defense, you cross-examine the witnesses, you confront the evidence, because you don't have to prove your client innocent. You have to put the state to their burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt. Now, if somebody tells you, does that affect the way you feel? Not me. I mean, maybe some lawyers, because, I was a judge. I was a judge for 17 years. I judged then. As a lawyer, you don't lay judgment upon people. You hear their story. For what it's, I tell you, most clients lie to you anyway. They make up stuff. They come in, they don't tell you the truth. We know it as criminal defense lawyers. But you take what you have, and you don't really base it on their story. You base your case and your defense on the evidence that the prosecution has against your client. And if the evidence isn't sufficient to prove them guilty beyond a reasonable doubt, that's what you go on. Again, Drew Peterson, I hate to be critical, I don't know if Brodsky's in this audience anywhere, but come on. Here's a case where, we talk about the confrontation. The United States Supreme Court, in a case called Crawford, says you have a right to have the person in court that you could ask questions to. You can't allow hearsay to convict somebody. And that's what we had in the Drew Peterson case. And all these guys had to do was rest at the close of the state's case, never have their clients say a word. And that goof got up and he introduced himself to the jury like this. What do you think about this, Mike? They go, can you introduce yourself? And Peterson stands up and says, I'm Mr. Peterson. Come on. What do you think the jury thought about that right away? That was like testifying against himself. I'm Mr. Peterson. Well, yeah, so what? And, but that's the kind of thing. It was that arrogance and that brought him down. But then, there was all this, and you can't really waive a constitutional argument, a constitutional issue in a case, but there's certain error that a judge could commit that you could waive if you let the error go. And that's exactly what happened in this Peterson case. Because here's a situation where there was no hard evidence, no murder weapon, couldn't put him at the scene, couldn't do anything. I mean, there was nothing except the voice from the grave that the prosecution wanted to bring in, that the appellate court said you could bring in some of that stuff, but the defense objected to it, and they won most of it. I mean, 17 motions to keep the testimony of Harry Smith, who's a local prosecutor out here, and a great guy. I don't know if any of you know Harry. He's a wonderful lawyer and a great guy, likable guy. Try to keep his testimony out, and then they put him on the stand. And you get a bright lawyer like Harry, who's very comfortable with people, very amiable, very affable, and very likable. I guess it's all redundant, but you get somebody, he gets on the stand, and the lawyer asks him, what did your client say to you? Well, my client said that, she called me, she said, if we tell the judge that Drew killed Kathleen, will that help us in a divorce? Okay. And then what did she say? Well, she said, if we tell the judge how he killed her, will that help us get more money? So now the lawyer gets all upset. I want to call him as an adverse witness, judge. Okay. Well, isn't it a fact that she did that to extort money out of him and that's the only she did it? No, that's not the only reason. She did that because she was scared of him, because she thought he was going to kill her the same way he killed his other wife. I mean, come on. Now all of a sudden the jury has the defense saying, which tantamount to putting on a confession in the defense. And all the objections, the hearsay objections in the first part of the case, a lot of those may be waived now because the defense put that, the appellate court can say, well, it might have been error, but it's harmless error because they put on the voice from the grave themselves and they shouldn't have done it. Then there becomes other issues of ineffective assistance of counsel and all that, but strategy doesn't count in effectiveness of counsel. So, but you decide based on, to answer your question, you decide based upon the facts that you have. Peterson was certainly a reasonable doubt case. Gacy was an insanity case. I really shouldn't criticize Peterson because I lost the Gacy case too, and
So you would have been happy had he been declared insane? I mean, you would have been, I don't know, happy, but then you would have gone to.
I would have been happy if we declared. I mean, I wanted to win. I mean, our defense was not guilty by reason of insanity, and if I won, prosecutor lost, that'd be on them. They would be on the police. They would be like in the OJ case. They screwed up that case because they didn't do their job. The defense was doing their job, and if I do my job, I go home and sleep at night because you got to do your best always. As far as what would happen to him, he never would have got out. Number one, he would have been found not guilty by reason of insanity. He would have been found unfit to be sentenced, and then he would have been put in a mental institution. He would have come up for review every couple of years or something, and you'd think any doctor would have let him. They wouldn't have let him out because he had to live in a structured environment. So he would have been locked up forever, and that was really our hope in the case that would happen. We would win, and he'd be locked up in a safe environment, safe to himself and safe to other people. But that's what we were hoping for. Yes, ma'am.
Okay,
I've got 5 minutes left. 5 minutes left.
I'm only going to choose one question. So my question is, you seem like John Wayne Gacy, this is just my impression, my opinion, that he was a very two-sided person. Would you say that through your experiences with him at the end, you felt bad for him? Like, you kind of seem like you felt as if he should have been, I don't know, like you feel bad for him, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
It's a good question, and
Thank
to the
you.
whole world, by the way, talk about execution, these guys, was it Sal and who was miking me up here? I was sweating when I came out because I felt like I was going to be executed with all these wires they'd put on me. I thought I was getting the chair. I got kind of, tricked in here. Anyway, did I feel bad? To the rest of the world, and that's why this book is called Defending a Monster, and I have this kind of ugly picture of Gacy in the front, because to the whole world, Gacy was a monster. To me, he was my client. And I didn't like Gacy. I don't like a lot of my clients, okay? But that's not my job to like them or not like them. My job is to defend them. But you certainly do you develop this relationship as attorney-client. And no lawyer wants to see their client put to death. No lawyer wants to see their client punished. You get to know them as a human being. To me, John Gacy was a human being. As each one of you in here, I don't know what your backgrounds are, I know each one of you are human beings, okay? And whenever we lose a human being, something in us goes away. We're all common, we're all from the common seed, right? We're all human beings. And when we lose somebody, especially in a violent way, it takes a little out of every one of us. So that's how I felt about it. I didn't want to be there when they killed him. Yes. I know she read my book, and gave it to her husband.
What are your personal thoughts on the hearsay law that was put in place for the Peterson case?
My personal thoughts on the hearsay law, I respectfully disagree with the Second Appellate Court District, which is out here. They kind of made what's called a bill of attainder for constitutional law today. A bill of attainder, ex post facto law, just to apply to Drew Peterson. And that issue certainly will be litigated, if not successfully in the Illinois appellate system, perhaps in the federal system, because I really think it was stretching it. I mean, hearsay. Hearsay is hearsay. It's unreliable. You guys, you see things on the internet. There's internet bullies. There's all kind of stuff going on. People say things about other people, and how do you believe hearsay? You need evidence. So I think the Illinois courts really stretched the hearsay situation just for Drew Peterson. But Charles Manson, John Gacy, Drew Peterson's, there's certain niches in our, they say bad cases make bad law. There's certain little exceptions in our special rules in our system of justice that apply to those special kind of cases. So the courts are liable to find a special rule for the Peterson case, which really, is bordering on constitutionality, and really not go into that issue, just kind of leave it alone, which is the key issue, but it could happen. I disagree with our courts the way they rule, though. Yes, Julie.
Thank you. Yes, Julia. This does not violate attorney-client privilege because he talked about the same stuff to other people?
Yeah, here, I wrote.
So is there stuff that you know that's not in the book?
The question is, does it not violate attorney-client privilege because it's public record? I put an author's note, if you get to the end of my book, and it explains, I don't want to read it right now, but it explains the whole reason, how I fought with that issue for many, many years. And the reason I determined that it really didn't violate the privilege. Some people might think it does, but I didn't think it does. It's explained in the note there. Yes, sir.
My name's Chris.
Chris.
In the name of science, could his death penalty been delayed with technology getting better?
Has it been delayed?
Could it have been delayed?
As far as what? What do you mean?
Like, the date of execution could have been delayed
Oh, his?
in the name of science?
They tried everything to delay the execution, but as Bill Kunkel said, who was one of the prosecutors in the case, now Judge Bill Kunkel out in Bridgeview, he said John Gacy was the poster boy for the death penalty, and there was nothing that really would have stopped that. Way in the back, yes.
Yes, I have a two-part question. The first one is, prior to the Gacy case, had you had prior experience in representing such people like John Gacy? And two, what was the impact on you as an attorney after representation such a crazy fellow?
I tell you, I was 6'4" before the case. I represented people, not like, there are not too many serial killers, thankfully, running around out there. But I did represent murder. I had murder cases and, and tried bunch of cases. We used to be on trial every week. I mean, literally, we had a jury in a box every week, and where I was in Des Plaines and the 3rd District at the time. So I tried a lot of cases. I tried a number of murder cases. That was my first capital case, but you know, it was that kind of experience. It changed me. As far as it changed my direction. I was going to be a personal injury lawyer, and then after the Gacy case, my referrals came in criminal law. So, you know, instead of making a lot of money as a PI lawyer, I'm still doing criminal defense, even after being on the bench all those years. Changed the direction of my law practice. Thank you. Yes, ma'am. Why did he pick me? Because I'm a nice guy. No, he actually, again, that's in a book, and he says, do me a favor. He knew me, and I knew him through now, I don't know, you don't get political. I'm a Republican now. I used to be a Democrat back there, and Gacy was a Democrat, and he belonged to the Democratic Organization of Norwood Park Township, and I did too. And when he was being followed by the police, he called me. I used to do some work for the organization. He knew who I was. He knew I was a chief public defender in the northwest suburbs. He figured I had clout, that I knew people, and he was looking for a break. That's why he called me. Boom, but I was in the middle of a big case. Yes, sir. Ma'am. He didn't. He gave me $3,000 retainer originally. It was my first retainer. I still have the check. Never cashed it even. But then later on, because they tore his house down and everything, and it was a capital case, Judge Garippo appointed me and Bob Mata to continue representing him, so we got paid by the county at the salary of a public defender for 1 year. Yes, sir. I think I have to wrap it up. Talk to you, if you have time, I will talk to you later. Thanks, guys. Happy Constitution Day.